Prophet Sheeth, peace be upon him. Sheeth is considered one of the earliest prophets sent by God after the creation of humankind and the placement of the first human beings on earth. He is recognized in the line of prophets and is accepted in the traditions of the Abrahamic faiths as a divinely appointed messenger following the passing of his father, the first human and prophet, Adam. The name Sheeth is often understood to mean appointed or granted, symbolizing that his birth was a gift and divine selection after the sorrow caused by the death of his brother. Sheeth was born after the death of his brother, who was killed by another brother out of jealousy. His arrival brought comfort to the grieving parents and was seen as a sign of hope and renewal. Unlike his elder siblings, Sheeth was viewed as a continuation of his father's mission on earth. He was not only a son, but also a spiritual heir. Many sources say he was chosen by God to carry the message of truth to humanity. He was believed to have received divine teachings, including written messages or scrolls, which he preserved and taught to others. As a prophet, Sheeth's mission was to guide the early human race toward the worship of one God, to establish moral values, and to preserve the teachings originally passed on by his father. He was seen as a bridge between the creation of humankind and the future generations of prophets. His role was both spiritual and social. He helped maintain the foundation of worship, justice, and righteous living in a world that was still new and vulnerable to corruption. Sheeth was a figure of peace, wisdom, and purity. He set an example of obedience, humility, and leadership through service. His influence extended beyond his own time, forming a link in the prophetic chain that would include later messengers. His guidance helped shape the first generations of human beings into communities that honored truth and righteousness. His life is often described as one of deep devotion, quiet strength, and unshakable commitment to the message of God. Many traditional writings mention that Sheeth was the first to receive a formal record of divine guidance in writing. These early scriptures, though not preserved in full today, were foundational for teaching the principles of worship, morality, and community life. He was among the first to establish organized worship, communal responsibility, and the teaching of sacred knowledge to the next generation. His prophetic role was not only to guide people religiously, but also to establish a stable and ethical society. He organized people into families and groups, assigned roles and responsibilities, and encouraged justice and kindness. He discouraged violence, pride, and selfishness, teaching instead love, forgiveness, and devotion to the Creator. Though historical details are limited, his legacy remains significant. He is remembered for his dedication to truth, his closeness to God, and his tireless work in building the early human community on strong moral and spiritual foundations. His story is not only a continuation of his father's mission, but also the beginning of a long line of prophets who would remind people of their purpose and their duty to the Creator. Birth and early life. Prophet Sheeth was born to the first human couple after the loss of their son, and his birth was regarded as a sign of divine mercy and restoration. He was born during a time when the human race was still in its earliest stages, and every birth carried both emotional and historical weight. Unlike his brothers, whose story ended in conflict and tragedy, Sheeth was born into a time of grief, but brought with him a sense of calm and healing. His parents believed that he was not only a gift but also someone chosen by God to carry on the sacred message. From the earliest days of his life, Sheeth displayed signs of exceptional wisdom and tranquility. He listened attentively, obeyed his parents, and showed a natural inclination toward reflection and inner awareness. His character was different from others around him. Where others played and quarreled, he preferred silence, observation, and learning. His father, the first prophet, took special care to teach him not only survival skills, but also spiritual truths that he had received directly from God. Sheeth grew up watching his father guide the first communities of people. He saw how moral choices shaped entire generations and how selfishness, envy, and disobedience could lead to destruction. These lessons shaped him deeply. He was given a strong foundation in both worldly knowledge and spiritual responsibility. His mother also played an essential role in his upbringing. She instilled in him values of humility, kindness, and loyalty. He grew up in a home that valued truth, worship, and deep remembrance of the Creator. By the time Sheeth reached maturity, he had already become known among his siblings for his calm nature, fairness, and intelligence. He would often be the one others turned to when disputes needed to be resolved, or guidance was required. He was not interested in dominating others, but in helping them understand the right path. He showed leadership through his character, not through control or force. As he matured, it became clear that he was set apart for something greater. His father knew that time was passing, and that a successor would be needed to continue the divine mission. He looked to Sheeth not only because he was a capable son, but because he exhibited the character and devotion needed for prophecy. As a result, when the father neared the end of his life, he privately passed to Sheeth's sacred knowledge that had been entrusted to him. This included the names of the first human generations, rules for ethical living, and secrets of creation that only a prophet should know. Sheeth received this knowledge with sincerity and humility. He did not see himself as superior to others, but as a servant of the Creator. He spent long hours in reflection, prayer, and learning. He memorized all that was passed down to him, and began teaching others as well. His early years were filled with experiences that shaped him into the man he would need to become a prophet, capable of leading people in a world that was already showing signs of division and moral decay. His early life was also marked by the challenge of watching his people struggle with right and wrong. Even within his extended family, there were those who leaned towards selfishness, greed, or arrogance. Sheeth did not condemn them, but reminded them gently and persistently to return to the path of truth. He used words of encouragement rather than anger, and lived as an example of the virtues he preached. His patience became one of his greatest qualities. One of the most important aspects of Sheeth's early life was the clear sense that his life was part of something much bigger. He was aware that he was a link in a chain that had begun with the first creation and would continue through the history of humankind. This awareness gave him a deep sense of responsibility and focus. He did not waste time on distractions, but prepared himself constantly for the work he believed he was born to do. He was also among the first to organize the people around him into structured communities that focused on moral development and worship. He taught them to share resources, help the weak, and avoid cruelty. He instructed them in the cycles of nature, the importance of seasons, and how to use their time in ways that pleased the Creator. Even as a young man, his wisdom was beyond his years, and people respected him not because of fear, but because of trust. In many stories passed down through tradition, Sheeth is described as having a radiant face and a peaceful demeanor. People who met him felt calm and uplifted. Children admired him, and elders listened to him. He did not carry weapons or speak with harshness, but his presence was strong and rooted. He became known not only as a son of the first man, but as a leader of the first communities. He would sit in solitude under the stars and reflect on the mysteries of life. And he would stand among the people to remind them that they were created with a purpose. His early life was therefore a journey of preparation emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually. He was born into a broken world, and rose to become a guide for it. His wisdom, sincerity, and commitment were signs of what he would later become. The early years of Sheeth's life laid the foundation for the prophetic mission he would inherit, and the character he formed in those days became the model for future generations to follow. The world at that time, the world during the time of Prophet Sheeth, was still young, raw, and unsettled. It was a period shaped by the direct aftermath of the first human experiences, including creation, sin, punishment, and the birth of civilization. Humanity was at its earliest stage, and there were no nations, cities, or governments as we know them today. People lived in scattered groups, mostly made up of the children and grandchildren of the first man and woman. These early human communities were learning how to survive, how to cooperate, and how to understand their purpose on Earth. There was no written law, no formal schools, and no advanced tools or technologies. People hunted animals, gathered plants, and used simple methods to cook and build. Language was still developing, and communication was mostly verbal, relying on memory and repetition. Traditions and lessons were passed from parent to child, and the memory of the first creation was still fresh in the minds of many. The teachings of the first prophet were known among the people, but not everyone accepted them fully. As generations grew, so did differences in belief and behavior. Some descendants of the first humans chose to remain loyal to the worship of one God. They continued to follow the path of truth and lived simple, honest lives. Others, however, became arrogant and rebellious. They began to forget their purpose and started chasing pleasure, power, and selfish desires. Pride entered their hearts, and they began to reject the teachings passed down to them. They wanted independence from divine rules and instead sought control over others. The most tragic sign of this growing corruption had already appeared in the murder of one brother by another. That crime introduced violence into the human story and showed how far people could fall when envy and anger were allowed to grow. It was a warning to future generations, but not all people learned from it. As the human population increased, so did the number of people who strayed from the path of truth. This was the challenge Sheeth would face in his time. There were no walls between people, no cities to divide them, but there was a growing separation in hearts. Some families lived in obedience, while others created their own ways of living. Some groups began experimenting with idol-like objects, giving honor to stones or trees out of fear, desire, or superstition. Others started to exploit the weak, taking food, land, or resources by force. Early signs of injustice, inequality, and false belief systems began to appear. In this world, nature was still in its original form. The earth was clean, rivers flowed freely, animals lived without much fear of humans, and the environment responded to the will of its creator. Yet, despite the harmony in nature, human beings began disturbing the balance. They hunted more than needed, gathered without sharing, and some began taking more than their share of land and food. The seeds of greed and oppression began to grow. There were also spiritual forces at work during this time. The deceiver who had caused the downfall of the first humans had not stopped his efforts. He moved among the people invisibly, whispering lies, encouraging hatred, and tempting hearts away from the truth. Many people who turned away from worshiping the Creator did so because they were deceived into thinking they no longer needed guidance. They believed they were strong enough, wise enough, or powerful enough to live without submission. But despite all this, many people still remembered the words of their first ancestors. They remembered the beauty of the garden from which they had been sent down. They remembered the pain of loss and the hope of forgiveness. In the middle of this moral confusion, there remained small groups of sincere people who gathered for worship, who taught their children to be honest, and who longed for guidance from above. These were the people who would listen when Sheeth would speak. It was during this time that new challenges appeared. With more people came more opinions. Conflicts became more common. Arguments over land, food, leadership, and belief turned into fights. Families broke apart. Trust began to disappear. Without a clear source of truth, every person tried to define right and wrong for themselves. This created confusion, fear, and instability. People needed a leader, someone who could bring unity, wisdom, and peace. In addition to moral confusion, the physical world also presented trials. Harsh weather, dangerous animals, illness, and hunger made survival difficult. People needed knowledge about planting, building, protecting, and healing. They needed guidance not only for their souls but for their bodies and homes. Yet the knowledge given to the first prophet was slowly being forgotten or ignored. That is why the role of Sheeth was so important. He was born into a world that stood at a crossroads. One path led to further corruption, destruction, and darkness. The other path led to revival, clarity, and connection with the Creator. The world of Sheeth was not filled with armies or great empires. It was filled with small tribes and scattered families. But within those small groups were big hearts, capable of great faith or great failure. It was a time of testing, where each soul had the chance to choose between light and shadow. The importance of Sheeth's time cannot be measured in buildings or wars. It was a time where human choices shaped the future of all generations. Would people remember their purpose, or would they forget? Would they return to the Creator, or follow their desires? Would truth live on, or be buried under pride and lies? These were the questions that the world faced during his time. And it was into this world that Sheeth was sent with the task of guiding people back to truth before it was too late. Signs of prophethood. The signs of Sheeth's prophethood began to appear even in his youth. While still a child, his behavior, speech, and sense of responsibility were noticeably different from those around him. He was quiet but wise, calm yet firm, and always respectful. People noticed that he did not behave like ordinary children. He avoided arrogance, showed compassion, and was deeply reflective. These traits were not learned from others alone. They were natural signs of his divine selection. As Sheeth grew older, his purity of heart and deep understanding of spiritual matters became more evident. He often spent long periods in solitude, reflecting on the purpose of life and the greatness of the Creator. Unlike others, he was not drawn to worldly pleasures or competitions. He preferred simplicity, prayer, and service to others. This lifestyle marked him as someone whose soul was connected to something higher than ordinary human desire. One of the clearest signs was the wisdom he displayed beyond his age. His answers to difficult questions showed insight that only a chosen soul could possess. When disputes arose in his community, he was often the one people turned to for judgment. His decisions were always fair, well-reasoned, and balanced. Elders and young people alike respected him, not because he demanded it, but because his character naturally commanded it. Another sign was the special attention and instruction he received from his father. Before his death, Adam passed on to Sheeth a sacred collection of knowledge, spiritual wisdom, historical truth, and laws of moral conduct. This transfer of knowledge was not random. It was clear that Adam believed Sheeth was chosen by the Creator to continue the mission of truth. This private education included deep teachings that no one else received. Many traditions say that Sheeth was the first human to receive revelation in the form of written scripture. He was given scrolls or pages containing divine instructions. These writings were not mere stories. They included laws, prayers, and ethical teachings that would guide his people. The ability to read, write, and preserve revelation was itself a sign that he had been prepared by divine will for a higher purpose. Some historical sources describe how even animals in nature reacted differently to Sheeth. Wild animals would calm in his presence. Trees would provide shade when he prayed. Birds would sing softly near him. These subtle signs reflected the harmony between the prophet and the creation, a connection that occurs only with those chosen by the Creator to represent his message. On earth thought. In addition, people in his community noticed that Sheeth had dreams that came true. These were not ordinary dreams, but visions full of symbolic meaning and divine messages. He would share these dreams only when necessary, and his interpretations were always accurate. These dreams often warned of future challenges or offered hope during times of fear. People began to see that Sheeth's soul was connected to knowledge beyond this world. His personal discipline also pointed to his prophethood. He would fast regularly, worship with sincerity, and advise people with kindness. He never spoke without purpose, and never remained silent when truth needed to be defended. His entire life became a mirror of divine guidance. Even those who rejected his message could not deny his character. His truthfulness, patience, and humility became legendary even within his own lifetime. One of the most important signs was the spiritual peace people felt in his presence. When Sheeth spoke, hearts softened. When he led prayers, others wept. When he advised someone, that person felt encouraged rather than shamed. His presence reminded people of their Creator and of their responsibilities as human beings. Such influence does not come from status or wealth, it comes from divine selection. Despite his gifts, Sheeth never claimed superiority. He always credited everything to the Creator. He reminded people that he was only a servant, a messenger, and a guide. His humility itself was a powerful sign of his prophethood. It is said that he wept often in his private prayers, asking for strength and forgiveness, even though he was free from the sins of arrogance or deceit. Another sign came from the consistency of his message. From the first day he spoke to his people until the last, his words never changed. He taught the oneness of the Creator, the importance of worship, the value of kindness, and the need for justice. He did not follow trends or adapt his message for popularity. He remained firm, sincere, and faithful to his mission. When his father passed away, Sheeth conducted the burial and led the final prayer. The calm and dignity he showed during that event revealed his deep connection with the mission he was now called to lead. It confirmed to the people around him that Sheeth had truly been chosen to continue what his father had begun. His leadership was not imposed, it was welcomed. As people began to follow him, their lives changed. Families that had been divided were reunited. People who had fallen into greed began to share. Those who had lost their way found new purpose. These transformations were not the result of wealth or power. They were the result of guidance that came from a true prophet. Thus, the signs of Sheeth's prophethood were clear to those who observed him closely. His character, wisdom, spiritual practices, dreams, ability to guide others, and the divine knowledge he carried all pointed to his unique role in human history. He was not only a son or a leader, he was a chosen one, sent to continue the light of truth at a time when the world stood between obedience and corruption. The call to prophethood for Sheeth did not arrive suddenly or in a dramatic moment witnessed by the people. Instead, it unfolded with calm certainty, supported by the wisdom, purity, and preparation that had already defined his life. From the moment his father passed away, Sheeth assumed the responsibility that had been placed in his hands. The sacred trust, the divine teachings, and the written guidance passed to him were signs that he had been chosen to continue the prophetic mission. The people around him already recognized his wisdom and leadership. After the death of the first prophet, they looked to Sheeth not just as a relative, but as a man of divine guidance. His father had publicly acknowledged him as his successor before his passing. This was more than family tradition, it was a divine appointment. The knowledge Sheeth received had been carefully preserved and passed down with full awareness that he would one day lead with it. The divine selection of Sheeth as a prophet was confirmed through spiritual experiences. He began receiving inspiration, clear understanding, true dreams, and internal certainty that he was being guided by the Creator. He would awaken from sleep with knowledge of what the people needed. He would pray and feel a deep connection to the divine, as if unseen truths were being revealed to his heart. These revelations came not with noise and fire, but with stillness and clarity. The call to prophethood for Sheeth was like light dawning after darkness, soft but unstoppable. He was given instructions not only for worship and belief, but for leading a growing society that was facing confusion, division, and the threat of forgetting its origin. He was chosen not only to speak about the truth, but to live as a complete model of it. The early people trusted him. They knew that Sheeth had lived a life of discipline, never lying, never harming, never seeking praise. When he began to teach more openly, to speak clearly about the laws of God and the need to return to pure worship, people listened. Some were already close to the truth and accepted his call quickly. Others were skeptical but could not deny his honesty or wisdom. Sheeth taught that there is only one Creator, that life on earth is a test, and that every soul is responsible for its actions. He reminded people of the fall of the first humans and how mercy was shown to them. He spoke of heaven and hell, of reward and punishment, and of the importance of justice. He emphasized kindness to family, fairness in trade, care for the poor, and honesty in all dealings. His call also addressed new challenges. As people grew in number, so did their conflicts. Sheeth taught systems for resolving disputes, principles for dividing land, and rules for respecting others' rights. These teachings were based on the divine knowledge given to him and served as early forms of law and ethics. He reminded people that without moral boundaries, they would fall into selfishness and destruction. The call to prophethood also involved training others. Sheeth began educating his children and trustworthy followers in the teachings of divine truth. He passed on knowledge that had been revealed to him, ensuring that it would not be lost or altered. He instructed them in writing, memory, and prayer, preparing the next generation to live in harmony with God's commands. Even those who rejected his call could not accuse him of injustice. They disagreed with his message, but had no grounds to criticize his character. This was itself a sign of true prophethood. He never forced belief, but always invited with wisdom and patience. He warned gently, encouraged sincerely, and never used anger to prove a point. As the human population expanded, the need for a guiding voice became greater. Families moved to distant lands. People faced new environments, new needs, and new temptations. Sheeth's message remained steady. He traveled to visit different groups, teaching them to remain united, to remember their shared origin, and to avoid the corrupt ways of pride and rebellion. The call also included correction of false practices that had begun to spread. Some people had started honoring objects, inventing rituals, or making rules that were not from God. Sheeth clearly warned them against these practices. He reminded them that worship must be sincere and directed only to the one true Creator. He taught that all power, beauty, and life comes from the divine, not from created things. The challenges were not easy. Many people resisted change, especially when it meant giving up their personal gain or comfort. But Sheeth remained firm. He did not change his message to please people. He stood for truth, even when it meant standing alone. His endurance was not from pride, but from trust in the purpose of his mission and the guidance he received from God. Through years of teaching, guiding, and warning, Sheeth fulfilled his call as a prophet. He left no doubt about his sincerity. He lived what he preached. He built a society rooted in justice and faith, and he prepared future generations to carry the message forward. His call was not just a moment hit, was a lifetime of service, rooted in devotion, delivered with wisdom, and protected by truth. The message and teachings, the core of Prophet Sheeth's message, was the worship of one God. He reminded his people that the Creator alone was worthy of obedience, praise, and prayer. He taught that life on earth was a test, and every soul would return to God for judgment. His mission was to preserve and explain the original truth passed down from the first prophet, to correct falsehood, and to lead his people toward a life of worship, justice, and purpose. One of the central teachings of Sheeth was the importance of sincerity in faith. He warned against showing off in acts of worship, or using religion for personal gain. He taught that God looks not at appearance or wealth, but at the intentions within a person's heart. Prayer, fasting, and charity were all encouraged, but only when done with pure intentions. Worship was not meant to be public display, but private devotion between the soul and its Creator. He emphasized the value of family ties and the importance of honoring parents, caring for children, and living with respect among relatives. He taught that breaking family bonds was one of the first signs of moral decay, and that families should be the foundation of society. Parents were responsible for teaching their children the truth, and children were expected to love and obey their elders. These teachings helped build strong homes, rooted in respect and love. Prophet Sheeth also gave guidance on how to live justly within a community. He spoke about honesty in trade, fairness in speech, and the importance of keeping promises. He warned against lying, cheating, and stealing. He called people to protect the weak, support the poor, and treat others as they would want to be treated. Justice, in his teachings, was not limited to courts or leaders. It was a personal responsibility for everyone. Another key aspect of his message was the importance of remembrance. He taught his people to frequently remember God through prayer, gratitude, and reflection. He encouraged regular times of worship, daily moments of silence and meditation, and the practice of praising the Creator for all blessings. He believed that forgetfulness was one of the greatest dangers for the human soul. When people forget their Creator, they become lost in pride and desire. Prophet Sheeth also introduced systems of learning. He taught his followers to write and to preserve knowledge. He understood that without careful teaching and memorization, the divine message could be lost. He instructed his students to record moral principles, family lineages, and lessons from their experiences. These early teachings formed the beginning of education as a spiritual duty. To learn, for Sheeth was to come closer to God. He also taught about the natural world. He explained the importance of seasons, the signs in the stars, and the changes in the moon. He encouraged people to observe the creation around them and to use it as a reminder of God's power and wisdom. He taught that nature was not to be worshipped, but respected as a sign of the Creator's greatness. Animals, plants, and natural resources were to be used wisely, with gratitude, and never abused. One of the most important themes in Sheeth's message was personal responsibility. He rejected the idea that a person could blame others for their sins or mistakes. He taught that every human being was born with free will and must choose between right and wrong. While God is merciful and forgiving, Sheeth explained that people must sincerely repent and turn away from evil to receive forgiveness. His teachings were a balance between hope and accountability. He also addressed the temptations and dangers that threatened the human soul. He warned against envy, pride, anger, and greed. These qualities, he said, had already caused great harm among the early generations. He taught that real strength was not in overpowering others, but in controlling one's own desires. Humility, patience, and gratitude were the true marks of a strong believer. These teachings were not just words. Sheeth lived by them every day. When new forms of false worship began to appear, Prophet Sheeth firmly opposed them. Some people had begun to honor statues, stones, or objects as sacred. Others invented rituals, not based on divine guidance. Sheeth warned that anything created cannot be divine. He explained that only the unseen Creator, who gave life and sustains the universe, is worthy of worship. His opposition to idolatry was clear and unwavering. He also gave instructions on dealing with disputes and solving community problems. He taught that disagreements should be handled with fairness, patience, and a sincere desire for peace. He encouraged people to seek truth, not victory. He trained trusted individuals to act as judges and counselors, making sure justice was available to all. These early systems helped maintain order in a growing and increasingly complex society. His message also included preparation for the future. He taught his people that many generations would come after them, and they must protect the truth and pass it on. He emphasized the role of teaching and guiding one's children. He warned that neglecting this duty would lead to corruption and loss. Therefore, Sheeth not only preached but trained others to become leaders, ensuring the continuity of divine guidance. Throughout his life, Sheeth maintained the same message. He never changed it to suit popular desires or social trends. He spoke with courage, even when his teachings were rejected by some. His commitment to truth and justice never weakened. His words, preserved by those who followed him, laid the foundation for many prophets who came after. His message was one of clarity, consistency, and compassion. Challenges and opposition despite Prophet Sheeth's sincerity and the clarity of his message. He faced growing challenges and opposition throughout his life. As the human population expanded, so did pride, greed, and rebellion. While many people followed him with respect and faith, others began to question his authority and resisted his teachings. The same human tendencies that had caused the first murder in history, jealousy, selfishness, and arrogance, rose again to challenge the truth. One of the earliest challenges came from people who did not want to obey moral limits. Sheeth taught discipline, honesty, and patience. But there were those who preferred freedom without responsibility. They viewed divine laws as a burden and claimed that life should be lived according to personal desires. These individuals rejected his calls for self-restraint and humility, choosing instead to follow their appetites and emotions. Another challenge came from the division between those who lived in remembrance of their Creator and those who began to forget. As time passed, new generations were born who had not witnessed the events of their ancestors. They did not know the original message directly, and many were influenced by worldly attractions. They questioned why they should follow old ways. This doubt led to the rise of false beliefs, careless living, and disrespect for the Prophet's guidance. A growing number of people began experimenting with objects and symbols in their worship. Some would carve shapes from stone or wood and place them in their homes or fields. At first, these were used only as reminders, but over time, people began offering them gifts and prayers. Sheeth spoke against these practices firmly. He warned that worshipping created things was a path to ruin. But his warnings were not always welcomed. Some people accused him of trying to control them or take away their traditions. Sheeth also faced opposition from individuals who sought power. As human groups became larger, leadership became more complicated. Some men, hungry for status and control, used lies and manipulation to gather followers. They promised wealth or freedom in exchange for turning away from Sheeth's teachings. These false leaders spread rumors against the prophet. They accused him of being outdated, overly strict, or jealous of others' success. Despite this opposition, Sheeth remained patient. He continued to preach with kindness and reason. He never responded with anger or violence. His mission was based on peace and truth. However, as the lies increased, so did the confusion among the people. Some began to doubt what was right. Families were divided. Some members followed Sheeth, while others followed false leaders. This social division became one of the greatest challenges of his time. Sheeth also had to face emotional pain. People he loved and cared for sometimes turned away from him. Friends and relatives who once respected him became distant or hostile. Some even mocked his message, calling it old-fashioned or unnecessary. These personal betrayals were deeply painful. Yet Sheeth did not allow these wounds to turn him bitter. He continued to pray for those who rejected him and hoped that they would return to the truth. One of the most dangerous forms of opposition came in the form of spiritual corruption. Some individuals began mixing truth with falsehood. They would speak part of the divine message, but twist it for personal gain. They pretended to represent faith, but spread confusion. This made it harder for ordinary people to recognize true guidance. Sheeth had to work carefully to separate truth from deception, always reminding his people to seek clarity and ask sincere questions. Physical danger also began to rise. Although Sheeth's mission was peaceful, there were those who became aggressive. Some threatened him directly. Others tried to stop his teaching through fear or intimidation. He was forced to relocate at times or travel with caution. Yet he never gave up his mission. His courage came not from pride, but from his trust in God and his deep sense of duty. There were also challenges related to the growing complexity of society. As people spread out over wider areas, it became harder to reach them all. Distance created isolation. Groups that had once been close became strangers. Local leaders developed their own customs, some of which clashed with Sheeth's teachings. Keeping unity among scattered people became increasingly difficult. Sheeth had to train and send trusted students to teach in distant regions. In addition to external challenges, Sheeth also faced the constant test of personal endurance. Prophets are not without feelings. They get tired, hurt, and overwhelmed. Sheeth had to carry the weight of an entire people's spiritual future. He prayed often for strength and wisdom. He asked for patience when he was rejected, and for guidance when his path was unclear. His personal discipline was his shield, and his devotion was his weapon. Despite the constant tests, Sheeth never gave in to despair. His opposition only made him more focused. He continued to call people with truth, to teach with clarity, and to lead with mercy. Even when the majority turned away, he did not change his message. His goal was not popularity but obedience to the divine command. His perseverance became a model for all prophets after him. In the end, the challenges Prophet Sheeth faced helped strengthen the foundations of faith. Through trials, he purified his message. Through rejection, he proved his sincerity. Through conflict, he revealed the power of patience and the beauty of truth. His mission was not easy, but it was successful in its purpose, to preserve the message of the Creator and offer a path of light in a world increasingly threatened by darkness. Legacy and impact. The legacy of Prophet Sheeth extends far beyond the time in which he lived. His influence shaped not only the first generations of humanity, but also the foundation upon which future prophets and righteous communities would be built. His role as the immediate successor to the first human and prophet gave him a unique position in history. He stood at the beginning of organized human life, guiding people through the earliest challenges of civilization with divine wisdom and patience. One of the most significant aspects of his legacy is the preservation of monotheism. At a time when people began to drift toward false worship and superstition, Sheeth upheld and reinforced the worship of one God. He taught that the Creator was unseen, eternal, and beyond all comparison. His rejection of idol worship and his constant emphasis on sincerity in prayer helped maintain the purity of divine belief in its earliest form. This foundation became essential for future prophets, who continued the same core message of God's oneness. Sheeth's legacy, also, includes his commitment to moral law and ethical living. He established principles of honesty, justice, and compassion that would serve as models for generations. He taught that the strong must protect the weak, that wealth should be shared with the needy, and that power must be used with responsibility. These teachings laid the groundwork for later laws and religious codes brought by future prophets. His insistence on truthfulness, kindness, and respect became part of the moral fabric of early human society. Another vital part of his legacy was the development of early education. Sheeth understood the importance of preserving divine knowledge. He encouraged writing, memory, and teaching among his followers. He instructed families to pass down wisdom, and he trained specific individuals to teach others. These efforts created a culture of learning and spiritual awareness that helped protect the truth from being forgotten or corrupted. His example inspired the first organized systems of spiritual education. The impact of his leadership extended into the structure of society. Prophet Sheeth guided the formation of communities built on cooperation, respect, and shared responsibility. He encouraged fairness in the distribution of land and food, honesty in trade, and peaceful resolution of disputes. These community values helped maintain unity and stability in a world that could easily have descended into chaos. He demonstrated that spiritual guidance and societal structure must go hand in hand. His family line also carried forward his legacy. Many traditions affirm that the lineage of prophets continued through Sheeth. From him came descendants who upheld divine teachings, led with justice, and carried the light of revelation into future generations. His spiritual and biological legacy ensured that his influence would not end with his own life, but would continue as a living force through time. Prophet Sheeth's life also left a legacy of personal character. His humility, patience, and sincerity became standards for those who wished to walk the path of truth. He showed that a prophet does not lead through force or wealth, but through example and moral strength. His quiet endurance in the face of rejection, his love for his people despite their faults, and his trust in the Creator during every trial became lessons that shaped the prophetic tradition. The preservation of divine knowledge in scrolls or written form is another remarkable part of his legacy. Though the exact content of these early revelations has not survived, the tradition of written guidance began with him. This paved the way for the scriptures that would come later: the Psalms, the Torah, the Gospel, and the Quran. Sheeth's effort to record and protect divine truth ensured that sacred knowledge could be passed on accurately and shared widely. Even those who rejected his message could not deny the order, peace, and stability that his leadership brought. Many who opposed him eventually returned to his path after seeing the consequences of their choices. Communities that once divided themselves found healing through the values he taught. His patience bore fruit over time, and his message found roots even in places where it had once been ignored. In spiritual tradition, Sheeth is remembered not only as a prophet, but as a father figure to early humanity. His care for others, his wisdom in solving disputes, and his compassion for the weak reflect the qualities of both a leader and a guide. He combined firmness with gentleness, justice with mercy, and leadership with humility. His legacy lives on in every teaching that calls for the worship of one God, in every act of justice, and in every community built upon truth. The impact of his teachings can still be felt today in the values and principles shared by the major faiths of the world. His name may not be as widely known as other prophets, but his work prepared the way for all of them. Without his preservation of divine truth, the message of later prophets would have faced greater corruption and loss. He was the link between the first revelation and the future messages that would come. In every generation that sought to return to truth, the legacy of Sheeth played a role. His life was proof that even in times of confusion and rebellion, divine guidance can survive. and flourished through patience, devotion, and righteous leadership. His impact is eternal, not because of monuments or conquests, but because of hearts he touched, lives he transformed, and truths he protected for the benefit of all humankind. Death and burial. The final years of Prophet Sheeth's life were marked by calmness, wisdom, and a growing awareness that his time on earth was drawing to a close. He had lived a long and meaningful life, filled with devotion, teaching, and leadership. As he grew older, his body weakened, but his spirit remained strong. He continued to guide his people, answer their questions, and remind them of their responsibilities. His presence remained a source of comfort and direction until the very end. As the signs of age became clearer, Sheeth began to prepare his followers for life without him. He gathered his family and trusted companions, and passed on the sacred knowledge that had been revealed to him. He carefully explained the principles of faith, the lessons of past generations, and the importance of continuing the mission. He reminded them that prophets come and go, but the truth remains eternal. He urged them to remain united, sincere, and loyal to the one Creator. He selected from among his children and followers those who showed the highest moral character and understanding of divine guidance. He appointed them as teachers, judges, and leaders to ensure that his message would be preserved and practiced. He did not seek to create personal power or a dynasty of control, but rather a chain of faithful servants who would carry on the task of guiding others with humility and truth. The time of his death approached with peace. There was no fear in his heart, only acceptance. He had lived his life in service to the Creator, and he knew that death was not an end, but a return. He spoke gently to his loved ones, blessing them and encouraging them to remain patient, prayerful, and grateful. His final words were filled with remembrance of God and concern for his people. When the moment came, his soul left his body in a state of calm and dignity. His followers, though deeply saddened, felt a sense of divine presence and acceptance. They had witnessed a life of truth, and now they witnessed a death that reflected the same peace and surrender. His passing was not marked by chaos or confusion, but by prayer, silence, and honor. The burial of Prophet Sheeth was carried out with great care and respect. His body was washed, wrapped in simple cloth, and laid to rest according to the practices he had taught. His grave was made in a place of peace, away from noise and conflict, where his memory could be preserved with reverence. His followers gathered to pray, reflect, and recommit themselves to the path he had shown them. The location of his burial is not known with certainty today, as time and history have covered many of the early sacred places. However, his legacy does not depend on a grave or monument. His true resting place is in the hearts of those who continue to walk in the light of his teachings. His memory lives in every act of worship, every word of truth, and every moment of patience practiced by those who seek to follow divine guidance. After his death, his followers mourned with sincerity but also celebrated the life he had lived. They shared stories of his wisdom, remembered his kindness, and taught their children about the man who had guided them from darkness to light. His example became the standard by which future leaders were measured. The way he lived, taught, and died set the model for prophets who would come after him. Prophet Sheeth's departure from this world marked the end of an era, but also the beginning of a legacy that would stretch across centuries. His burial was not the burial of a man alone, it was the honoring of a mission, the conclusion of a sacred chapter, and the planting of seeds that would grow in the hearts of future generations. His name became associated with peace, guidance, and the preservation of truth. In death, as in life, Sheeth remained a servant of the Creator. His humility never left him. His people remembered him not only as a prophet, but as a father, a teacher, and a leader whose light never dimmed. His passing reminded them that true greatness lies not in power or fame, but in obedience, sincerity, and service to God. Interfaith perspective and historical relevance. Prophet Sheeth occupies a respected and foundational position across multiple religious traditions that trace their origins to the early history of humanity. Though not as widely discussed as later, Prophet Sheeth's significance is recognized in various scriptural and historical sources within Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and ancient oral traditions. Each faith tradition holds pieces of his story, reflecting a shared memory of a prophet who served as a bridge between the first human, Adam, and the long line of messengers who would come after. In Islamic tradition, Sheeth, often written as Sheeth or Sheeth, is considered a prophet and the direct heir to Adam's spiritual and prophetic legacy. Though not mentioned by name in the Quran, his prophethood is affirmed in authentic hadith literature and the writings of early Islamic scholars. He is believed to have received 50 scrolls or pages of revelation, guiding humanity after Adam's death. Islamic historians like Ibn Kathir and Al-Tabari describe him as the one who preserved monotheism in a time of growing moral decay. Muslims regard Sheeth as part of the prophetic chain that culminated in the final messenger, Prophet Muhammad. In Judaism, Sheeth is known as Seth and is regarded as a righteous son of Adam. The Hebrew Bible, specifically the Book of Genesis, describes him as the child through whom the human line of righteousness continued after the death of Abel. While the Jewish tradition does not formally assign prophetic status to Seth, he is seen as a blessed figure, the father of Enosh, and the beginning of a godly lineage that would eventually include Noah, Abraham, and Moses. Some Jewish mystical texts, like the Sefer HaYashar, include accounts of Seth's piety and role in preserving sacred knowledge. In Christian tradition, Seth, he's also a central figure in the early chapters of Genesis. He is viewed as the righteous replacement for Abel and is considered the spiritual ancestor of Jesus Christ through the genealogy outlined in the Gospel of Luke. Early Christian thinkers, especially during the patristic era, associated Seth with the concept of the chosen line. While Christian scripture does not detail his life or label him as a prophet, apocryphal writings and early church historians describe him as a holy man who preserved divine wisdom and maintained a pure heart. In a corrupt world, historically, Prophet Sheeth's relevance lies in his role as the first bridge between revelation and civilization. He led humanity during a period of transition from small family units to larger communities, from oral memory to written records, from survival living to structured worship and law. He was the first to lay down organized teachings after Adam and the first to institutionalize divine worship beyond personal spirituality. His example shows how divine guidance adapted to the developing needs of human society. Sheeth's teachings influenced the cultural ethics of early civilizations. Many of the moral values he taught, honesty, justice, care for the poor, protection of family, were passed down and preserved across generations, eventually becoming part of the religious and ethical systems of many nations. His impact can be seen in the universal moral principles that exist across diverse societies. Sheeth was a symbol of that continuing mercy, a proof that even after loss, failure, or rebellion, God sends light to those who seek it. His story reminds all believers that divine truth has always been available to those willing to follow it with sincerity and courage.